Hello, and welcome to OnSurviving. My name is Meagan, and I'm a survivor.
My name is Noblelee, and I am a survivor.
Together, we're bringing OnSurviving to the world because it matters.
It matters to me because alongside the potent fears of our frail hearts is so much hurt, loss, and trust issues that I often had to navigate through all alone with very little resources and zero trust. I am passionate about this project because I get to be that trusting, supportive person to be there and help navigate through the resources that I didn't have and hopefully make a difference in people's processes of surviving.
And it matters to me because I want others to recognize the deep strength and rich humanity involved in every step in the process of surviving the tragedies life brings many of us. I suffered silently and alone for too long. And I want to help others to find hope more quickly and readily and feel and be less alone in the process of surviving.
OnSurviving matters, we matter, you matter.
All right. So good to be back. Don't you think, Noblelee?
Yes. Season 2.
Yay. Oh, it's so great. And we're starting off with, I think, a kind of a rich and challenging question. We may leave with more questions than answers, but basically the topic that we're talking about today, we've called Bent Not Broken. And by that, we mean that, many of us may be struggling with our mental health for a whole variety of reasons and feeling that there is something wrong with us. But in many ways, our struggles are normal and natural. And the way, with proper support from mental health and other systems, we can really live our best lives and fullest lives. And so that's the idea behind this. And it's a really big challenge, I think, to kind of weed through how that may be different than where we are now. So really kind of at the core of that is really kind of challenging mental health systems and possibly other related support systems as well. So now let's see, we do, as always, we speak frankly. There's a possibility in that process that somebody may be watching or listening and may be triggered by something that any of us say. And we want you to know that, well, first of all, we really want to remind you to take care of yourself first and foremost. Turn it off, get up and talk to somebody that you love and care for, whatever you need to do to care for yourself. And if you're really kind of triggering into a crisis situation, or even just feeling a lot of anxiety and just need to talk to somebody and don't have somebody right there, there are a lot of resources available that can help you. I'm going to show you something a little bit different than what we have shown in the past. There are a variety of different crisis lines, what are known as crisis lines, and some are in true crisis and suicide lifelines. And you can see 988. You can text 988. You can call 988. And that's a really great resource here in both English and Spanish. There's this crisis text line that you can use as well. A couple of others, and I think it's really important to be mindful of where you feel safest. The Trevor Project offers an LGBTQ crisis line, trans lifeline here. There's there's a phone number for Canada too, but we just have the US one listed right here. And a veterans crisis line, also another group with some, unique needs sometimes and unique understanding to have. So just know that those resources are available to you, even if you're feeling super alone right now. So you're not alone. And we encourage you to reach out for that support. So That said, take it away, Noblelee. Yeah, unmute yourself.
I'm so sorry. I'm super excited to invite our guest, Troy Christensen. He is the former director of the Rainbow Center and the current director of the Congregations for the Homeless. Troy, would you like to come on and tell us a little bit?
Noblelee and Meagan.
You're so welcome. Thank you for being here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself professionally and personally, and why this topic means so much to you?
Sure. Most of my career has been in behavioral health. I started in community mental health, working both at Good Samaritan Mental Health Center and Greater Lakes Mental Health Care, and spent 15 years doing that work. And it is the most affordable mental health treatment that we have in this country, is in community mental health centers. And so to prepare for that work, I have graduate degrees in counseling, clinical psychology, and health administration, and I'm a licensed mental health counselor. That said, I have not been practicing directly for quite some time, even though I've been a supervisor. And part of the challenge that I found when I was working in community mental health were a lot of people with serious and persistent mental illness struggled to stay housed. And so at that point, I began developing housing that could be owned by a nonprofit so that they could give people more chances than they're likely to get out on the open market with the property management company. And that work led me to overseeing the plans and funding to end homelessness for Pierce County in the early 2000s. And then I've been pretty much an executive director since in a variety of different organizations.
Awesome. Thank you so much and welcome. You know, it's interesting. I hadn't really thought about your path so much before, but it struck me as I was listening to you there that I had a kind of flip-flopped path a little bit, where working with communities to address homelessness. It was in that process that I learned, like really the high degree of trauma and mental health concerns, and that was really this shared common, at least generally, experience of folks that I was talking with, and then was like, I really want to spend more time thinking and talking about our mental health and whether it's something that you're born with, or if it's something that is a response to trauma or other conditions. So anyway, cool. Interesting to hear. And so welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Noblelee and I always start thinking through a topic by writing about our experiences related to that topic. And so we'd like to start off just kind of offer a little springboard in our conversation by giving just a kind of quick summary of each of the articles that we wrote. So just really briefly, I can share that my piece talked about how I struggled for much of my life, thinking that there was something wrong with me, like inherently wrong with me, or that I was just impossibly damaged. And that's what I could expect for the rest of my life. And at the same time, and that's really like kind of the messages I was getting everywhere I looked, including in counseling from my doctors, my medical doctors. But I had this nagging sense that what I was experiencing and how I was feeling and behaving was human. I mean, just really, really human. And like, I was like, well, who wouldn't, and wait, I didn't, this is my fault. Somebody did this. And, so anyway, I guess, that's where I kind of went and talked about that, what I came to believe or see, what was that it was that there was actually something wrong with the people who hurt me, the systems that failed to support me well. And frankly, in some cases, and society in general. And I think, I'm not actually sure. I'm really curious about this. I'm not sure what the real difference is in what that looks like in care. But for me, I talked about in my piece that, it's a really subtle but powerful shift for me, because when I think about it that way, it shifts from this sense of doom, to seeing hope, and possibilities for myself as a whole and healthy person. So I think that, about sums up mine, Noblelee.
And what I wrote about was the major traumas that I've experienced in my life and how I felt broken increasingly, due to the stigma that you shouldn't need help, and I got very, very little support. And I was often treated like I was a bad kid and a bad human being. And the support that I did get it just wasn't helpful for me. And so I was brought up believing that, there's something wrong with me. And I go on to write about how I finally did get support that did help me at a Native American treatment center. And it was there that I described in my piece that I started feeling like a willow tree, which describes that I may be bent, but I'm definitely not broken. And that I was 40 years old when I got there. And so that, as you were just speaking of, Meagan, it gave me hope that I'm not, that I'm not the scars and the traumas that as a result of those, that something isn't wrong with me. And so I had these, 40 years worth of extreme self-esteem issues that were now, believe me when I say had lots and lots of work and continue to still work on those issues, but finally felt like that there could be a future for me. So that's a lot about what my piece was about. So.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, Noblelee, but isn't it, once you got some really positive, actual help, at the Native American Treatment Center, things have been, kind of a not exactly a straight line up, but it's you've been healing and feeling much stronger, better, and like faster, right, than other things. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say. That's where it started. As they say, the first layer started coming off of me. And then I felt like, that I was worth something. And then as a result, I had the courage to, remain abstinent and get into a recovery home. And it just keeps going on and on and on. It's always it's always work. And I keep finding more and more things come up that I continue to work on. But this is a life that sometimes when I would lay there, in despair, I would dream about this life that I have. And by this life, I mean how I feel here. I just never thought that that's something that I was worthy of. And now that hope piece was crucial in me being able to move forward in my journey of feeling better and feeling worthy and feeling important and feeling valued and all the things that come with everything that I never felt for the majority of my life.
Right. I want to remember that, hopefully come back around to that sense of worthiness, because I think there's a thread that I think is to that's important to this conversation. So thanks.
You're welcome.
So I also wanted to note that Troy, I was so excited, Troy, that that we're able to find you from shifting from organization to organization, because Troy is the person that I reference in the piece that I wrote, the person who I was lucky enough to interview and talked with me about the need for mental health services that better reflect the experiences of queer and Black and Brown communities. And also, and what really stuck with me was the part of that conversation we had where he took issue with kind of the nature of the profession being kind of rooted in viewing like what I see as, natural human responses to untenable conditions as illnesses to be treated. So we're going to turn to you now, Troy, and I want to start off with a couple of big questions to just help us better understand your thinking on this. And so first off, as you see it, do you, or how do you see, system conditions, system issues, societal issues, maybe generational conditions factoring into our mental health?
Well, let me first say thank you for having me here. And yeah, I mean, the very core of what we consider to be psychology and psychiatry today, in large part, grew out of a white supremacist patriarchy. And it was, well-intended people, but they designed a system, not just when I say the system of community mental health or of healthcare in general, but also the system of what we believe about psychology and psychiatry. It was, and there are lots of people trying to do better by that today. I want to make sure that this isn't just an indictment of the mental health system, because most people who are practicing in community mental health today have been trained in trauma-informed care, which was not the case 20, 30 years ago. Many have been through some form of diversity training or sensitivity training, but it's not the same as having lived those experiences. I don't know if I answered the question you wanted me to, or if I answered something else. And you're muted now.
We're going to have this a few times, I suspect. Luckily, we're, come as you are kind of kind of conversation. So, I think so to some degree. So, I'm really interested in that, like that piece where you're talking about the trauma-informed care. And so those things that might, is there a difference in that in, say, are there some kind of diagnoses that you would say are still kind of that, the way I've read it is as a biomedical kind of way, like of diagnosing an illness versus a trauma response, or maybe a response to bias. I can imagine like a kid growing up in a school system where just everything is like, it's not geared toward you. It's not the way you learn. You get messages about who you are because of the way you look, things like that. And that's got to have some sort of impact on your psychology in your psyche.
Yes, absolutely. when I think of mental health or mental illness, which I think are different, but also, come from the same basic premise about being balanced in some way psychologically. There certainly are people with serious chemical imbalances that result in them being psychotic and not even at times able to participate in society. And the answer to that has been medication. And there have been a lot of breakthroughs with that. And that's not usually the result of illness of injury. It's usually the result of an illness that no one has any control over. And medication to keep them safe from themselves and from others at times is necessary. But then you have people who have, as a result of just living in our society, that are labeled as mentally ill as a result of adapting to whatever trauma happened to them. Finding a balance in their mental health, I think, to me, is a respectful way to say, how do you get from here to where you want to be? I think diagnosing them as mentally ill is problematic for a variety of reasons. The 30 years ago in community mental health, someone shows up at the front door for their first appointment and the therapist says, "Tell me what's wrong with you. Tell me what's happening." There are a lot more therapists today who start with, "Tell me what happened to you," because of the training that they've received and understanding about what it means to be traumatized, where you're simply reacting to, I think, as Noblelee said, an untenable situation, but you have to adapt in some way or you freeze and die. And so that's not dealt out to people equally. Straight white Christian men get the least of that. Queer people of color, women get the worst of that. And it results in, it's the result of living in a society that is constantly telling you in one way or another, subtly or directly, that you're not valued in the same way as others are. And that can happen in the home, it can happen in schools, we certainly see it on television, on billboards, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, things are getting better, but to suggest that a therapist takes a diversity class and now they're qualified to provide therapy to an African-American person who has lived in this society and received those messages day in and day out and had to fight against those messages, had to fight harder just to get basic life stuff than their peers, should not be diagnosed as mentally ill, in my opinion, and should not be treated by a white therapist. Now, I say that knowing that there probably are a few white therapists who spend their career focusing on a particular population that may actually get pretty good at it. But in general, and certainly in community mental health, which is where a lot of people who've experienced trauma, whether that's, heavy trauma in your home or whether it's just the trauma of life, end up going for care. And the therapists there are very unlikely to have the training necessary to actually help you. A good therapist would spend a lot of time learning what it means to walk in that person's shoes. If you get 6 sessions, if you get, even if you get 2 years worth of therapy, it's going to take at least half of that for someone to have an understanding of what it's like to be you. Now, I want to throw out as a caveat, yes, everyone's different. Every every person is. It doesn't even mean that a white therapist and a white client are going to be the right match. But the system is rigged against BIPOC people, people of color. It's rigged against queer people. It's rigged to some degree against women. There are certain diagnoses that are handed out almost exclusively only to women. And men with the same exact symptoms are not given that diagnosis. And so there's bias all over in the system for that. I can give you a personal example. I was fired as an executive director from an organization after they found out I was married to a man. And I wasn't fired immediately. There was a lot of bullying that took place. And eventually I, stopped working there. I went to a straight therapist that was recommended by my insurance company for 16 sessions. And I felt about the same as when I started at the end of it, because I knew I had depression and anxiety symptoms. It was hard for me to do stuff I used to do just because of thoughts that were going through my head, because of physical reactions that I would have based upon the trauma that occurred to me. And I did get referred to a primary care physician who prescribed an antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication, which helped some. But I knew that really I was not, medication wasn't the fix. I didn't have a chemical change in my body that suddenly, except as the result of behavioral stuff. It wasn't that this just snuck up on me out of the blue and suddenly I was having panic attacks. This was the result of something that was traumatic for me. I ended up then going to a queer healing coach, and I did 16 sessions there. And not only do I no longer need the medication, I feel like my life is back on track. I didn't have to spend any time explaining to her what it was like to be me, because she knew when I walked in the door. She knew at least of similar experiences of similar people that have lived in a society that says you need to be straight and Christian and you're not supposed to be gay and you're not supposed to, all of those things. And as a mental health counselor, it made me feel a little ashamed about the arrogance that I had when I was younger about providing care to anyone. And I shouldn't have. I even remember as a supervisor in a community mental health center, the state passed a policy or a law that said, if you're receiving mental health treatment in a community mental health center, and it's by a therapist who's, you're an older adult and your therapist isn't, you're a Native American and your therapist isn't, you're gay and your therapist isn't, you're trans and your therapist isn't, that they are required to get a consultation with a specialist. Almost always those consultations came back saying there appear to be no cultural issues that are getting in the way of this person's treatment. Yeah, exactly.
How could that be?
It can't. It can't.
Okay.
Culture is at the center of who we are. It's our identity. It's part of how we identify what the human experience is for us. And that culture may include a lot of things that society in general says have less value. I mean, you both know as women that you're not given the same chances in every arena as men are. There are messages that tell you you're weaker, that you have less ability to control your emotions. I mean, all these different messages that are out there everywhere. And people, there are good people trying to fix that, but it's going to take a long time for that to happen. And so I think if you are a person of color and you go to a white therapist, unless they were just highly recommended because of the work they had done with people of color, you could actually come out worse than you entered, because they can do harm and not be helpful. They'll make assumptions that you share life experiences that you don't. This is the whole, it ties into everything from class to wealth to gender, and we all pretend like the game isn't rigged, and we just wave our hands and pretend like it's all fine, but it's not. It isn't. The game is rigged.
Right. So in the traditional, in the old system, I mean, it's the current system, but in the traditional system, there's this manual that tells you, these symptoms, and that's this diagnosis and this illness, and you treat and approach treatment this way. And I hear you talking about really more contextual understanding, and that those cultural influences, and you're right, like there's all sorts of ways of looking at the culture and our life experience and how that butts up against. And I actually wanted to throw in another example from my experience, because I realized I wrote about it a little bit in my piece, but not why I was there. I said I was in, 10 minutes, I was in this therapist's office, and he had diagnosed me with a personality disorder. It was important that I note that I was actually there with my then husband in marriage counseling, because I had fallen in love with a colleague who was a woman, and I had come out, and we were trying to figure out what to do with our marriage, because there was this person who I still very much cared about, loved even, but I was in love with this woman, and and so he's like, well, tell me a little bit about your background. I told him about being sexually abused as a child, and like, I'm in love with a woman, and I was sexually abused as a child, so you have this personality disorder. And it threw me, and talk about damage. I mean, I was thrown all night. It was awful.
For sure. That's a great example of the abuse or the harm that can be caused. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I want to dive in more, and I'm sure there's stuff coming up for you too, Noblelee. I want to dive in more to the example you gave about the care that actually was effective. But first, we have a couple other things that we want to get to. Let's see, did I cover I think we kind of went all into like, let's kind of get an understanding of what we're talking about, these like differences in these systems. So a handoff to you again, Noblelee.
So given the kind of support that was given or not given to myself, I turned to self-harm at age 10. And then I turned to, I had a substance abuse disorder that lasted decades as ways to cope. And, I know that you also felt like you weren't supported a lot, Meagan. So what are some of the things that, that you had to do to try to cope?
Right. So I had similar consequences, I think, of not getting good support. Alcohol was my first line, which I used to say that I used to believe that I became an alcoholic after my daughter died. But I realized in the process that that wasn't so, that I drank alcoholically since the first time I had a drink, which was as a teenager, in response to, having no useful support. In fact, another like bad counseling example was after going to a counselor after my stepfather abused me, was that the counselor asked me if I liked it. Yeah. And so, I had some issues. And then, of course, there's a lot of shame around getting help anyway, right? So, I mean, just this whole idea that you're sick and there's something wrong with you. And then, parents are like, it was this shameful thing. So, yeah. So, drinking made me feel better. Then, and then, as an adult, when things got piled on, and really, I did start, especially after my daughter died, I did use drugs a lot when I was, actually, what I talk about is I worked 80 hours a week, and when I wasn't working, I was drinking and drugging, and I don't think I was sleeping very much. Because I couldn't bear to sleep because that would be quiet and everything. It was like when she died, like all the demons came, everything came in full force. And so I would use that, overworking, drugs, alcohol, risky sex, all of it, anything to make me feel what I couldn't bear to feel. Yeah.
Yeah, that's familiar. And another thing that happened too was, in the Native American culture, we're always taught like you don't ever say what's going on in your home life. It's like forbade, And so I have all this stuff that's going on with me, and I'm not allowed to tell anybody. And so in a very small reservation community, I was labeled like the bad kid. Like, you cannot hang out with her. There's something wrong with her. And like, nobody ever took the time to find out why. Like, that obviously I'm not just born a terror, if you quote unquote, So yeah, I can relate to what you're saying a lot in that. So I was going to ask Troy, given all the people that you and your organizations have worked with over the years, does this sound pretty common to you? And if there was more of the kind of support that you're talking about in situations with people like ours?
Yes, it's very common. And it's very common to say, you're the one with the problem, you're the sick one, rather than what happened to you. Let me see if I can help you sort through this and figure out what negative messages you're giving yourself probably all of the time because of something that not only you didn't cause, but someone else deliberately, maliciously caused.
Right. I mean, because some of that we're dealing with the trauma in a society that's, racist and homophobic and sexist. And like you had mentioned before, the wrong therapist or, counselor, can contribute to all of that.
Absolutely. And, it is, you'll hear therapists say with really great intentions, we need to make sure that we're a good match. If we're not, I can refer you to someone else. You should maybe even see 2 or 3 therapists before you decide who's a good match for you. Not with no understanding that none of the 3 therapists are qualified to help you.
Yeah.
Not to mention, a lot of people don't have the resources to shop. It's not like those appointments are free. So
well, and the insurance companies are, they're in on it too, because if you don't have one of those diagnoses that make you mentally ill, you can't get your therapy paid for, even if you have insurance.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that dimension. That's that's an important distinction.
So what changes or impacts would you like to see, Troy?
Well, first off, I think if this is really important to us as a community or as a society, then we need to be making sure that we have easy entry into these fields for people who can be qualified to provide treatment to those special populations. And, even as I say it, special populations almost makes it sound like, there's something wrong with them. They're in some minority group or, and I just mean by special populations, I mean the people who the world is against all the time anyway. That's what I mean by that. And so I think if we made it easier for people of color to become counselors or queer people to become counselors, and then we had more therapists for people to choose from, I think would make a big difference. Of course, it's so much easier for a white person, especially a middle-class, straight, white Christian person, to get the education that's required. Now, I can tell you, as someone with a bachelor's degree and 3 graduate degrees, I didn't need most of that to be a good therapist. What I actually used in therapy probably came down to 4 or 5 total classes out of all of that. Now, that said, there's also part of a formal education that results in people becoming more critical thinkers. And, I don't mean to suggest that education in and of itself is not valuable, because I absolutely believe it is. And I remember in my education journey, when I finally reached a point where I felt like I'm good enough. I have, and it's interesting because I thought it would be getting the degree that would make me feel good enough, but it wasn't. It was just continuing on the path and eventually feeling good enough. And I didn't even need to get the degree in the end if I didn't want to. But there was something about the process of education that sort of lifted me up and helped me feel more powerful and more able to make a difference in the world. And so I say all of that because, and I should say, then there's 2 years after you graduate before you can become licensed to treat someone. And in those 2 years, you're being treated by people in the same system that is messing everyone up.
Right.
So, and I should say that those 4 or 5 classes that prepared me to provide treatment to someone who had very similar life experiences, similar demographics to me, not to be able to provide that to anyone else.
Right. So what I wish is, like you had mentioned, the best person to help out a transgender person is a transgender person with similar, life experiences, right? So how cool would it be to have scholarships that are only for transgenders, or that are only for, to small-in that, so that they can get the education, Native Americans and women of color and transgenders and queer folk, to where they have a chance, because there's a scholarship that's only for that, type of individual. And so I believe that in my personal opinion, there would be more people getting the classes and getting to be the licensed therapists and counselors, because they have that same shot. I really would hope for that, because I had similar situation where I had been traumatized by a Native American counselor as a child, because they completely told everything. They broke all confidentiality laws. And so as an adult, I went and I saw a white therapist who was a male. And he, was like, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. And, I'm proud of my culture and proud of who I am. So I said, well, I'm Native American and I grew up on a reservation. And the first thing he says to me is, whoa, you're an Indian? I went to a powwow once. And I'm like, so anyway, needless to say, it was not a mix. And then I got the whole thing. Well, you can see as many as you want, but can I? Because I'm on a state insurance that allows, 6 sessions. And so, anyway, that being said, it is really important to have somebody that has, the same kind of experiences, comes from different, the same places that we have, in order to have success. Like you had the 16 sessions with, the one way, and then you had the 16 sessions with a queer person where it was a complete success. So anyway, I would like to see that the scholarship and stuff more readily available, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, I know the Pride Foundation has scholarships specifically for queer students, but I don't know that there's any incentive to go into mental health treatment as a career. You mentioned a trans person going to therapy. This is a really embarrassing moment in my career. We had a female therapist who was providing therapy and case management to a trans man, meaning a man who was wanting to be female. Under my supervision, she provided care to her for 4 years. And at about that time, the client announced that she wanted to transition back to being a man, but had been living as a woman. And the therapist came into my office glowing and happy that she had announced this to her. And it wasn't until that moment that I realized, oh my God, this whole time, she has to have been sending messages that there was something wrong with transitioning. And then the message was, oh, I'm so happy, and probably God is happy, that kind of message. And I thought, I should have been able to predict this. I should have seen it. I knew the therapist was religious. I should have known, or at least wondered. But we didn't, this was 25 years ago. We didn't have any trans therapists on staff. We had a couple of gay therapists, but only one of them was out for a variety of reasons. And so, and there are lots of gay and lesbian people who are bigoted toward trans people. So you can't even make an assumption that, someone is safe for all queers. So yeah, I still almost tear up every time I think about that, about the number of years of damage that happened under my watch.
Heartbreaking story. And thank you for sharing that. I am curious about when you talked about the care that you got, Troy, that was really helpful. You referred to the person as a coach, which is interesting to me, because where I felt like I finally had transformative, like real healing, was actually working with a coach as well. And And I'm really curious about that, combined with the statement that you made about insurance.
Yeah.
So is that, and especially given, also add in what you said, right, kind of at the top of this conversation. Oh shoot, I just completely blanked on what I was going to say. What was it on the top? So shifting the coaching, I don't know. I'm sorry. I lost. Go ahead.
That part. I'll take that part of the question. And if you think of the other, you can,
Good.
So yes, this was someone, I don't even know what her education was. She was clear that she's not a therapist. And the things that she had me do are not things I would imagine a therapist would. Although they could. I mean, it did include some things like journaling and morning routines and stuff like that. But there was no, dig into my past and any of that. It was, we did a lot of visioning and a lot of rituals. And it felt magical, honestly, to me. And I decided not to dissect it because it was working and I wanted it to. And so, I don't know. There was something about not only her being queer, but her not being a therapist, because I didn't feel like this was about, something from my past or something from my current experiences. It was really about what was happening right in that moment that I was stuck. And therapy didn't get me unstuck from that, but these rituals and the visioning and the journaling did.
Yeah.
And I had to pay for it all out of pocket. And I'm fortunate and privileged enough to have been able to do that, because she charged more than the therapist did, even before insurance. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh, you hit on so many things there. So I find this really interesting too, because I had a very similar experience. The word magical that you used was, I felt that way too. And we also didn't dig into the past. Now, I had done a lot of digging into my past, and I think that was important for me to understand. But I had been to so many therapists, I'm like, I get it. Like, I understand that these are what are triggering these kinds of feelings, but I can't seem to make the shift in my body and my, I keep running up against, and like, yeah, I can go on forever in these, in counseling, if I'm able to pay for it, and it's just not working. And then ended up doing pretty well. My consulting work was going well, and was able to pay for this very, very expensive coach. And then various other tools. I remember walking one time and doing a meditation that he was having me do it. I was thinking, man, healing is privileged. It feels so privileged. That kills me. So let's use that as a jumping off point to something where it feels like there's some things that we should all just be able to do. Those of us who are really struggling with our lives and how we feel in our lives, and managing whatever because of trauma, because of the biases and horrible messages we're getting all the time in society. Are there useful ways for us to think differently about these things, about our experiences, about our responses to those experiences, and kind of things that activities we can do? I'm not, obviously everybody's different, yes, and I'm just like, can we shake this up a little bit and think about what we can what power and agency we can take for ourselves?
Yes. And that's the reason I really liked the coach over the therapist, because there were things that I would say and she would say, I totally get that. And here's how a lot of people reconcile that with living in this world today and reconcile who they are and what they do, and that they don't turn and run from our culture, right? Because that's what I'm sure most of us who fit in some category, where we're discriminated against in some way, feel like this is not the place I want to be, but it's the only place there is, right? And so I think that's how people end up being suicidal without, having a depressive chemical imbalance. It's just, you've heard the death of 1,000 paper cuts, with microaggressions. So it's like that. And I don't know if all the viewers will know that. So I'll just say it. It's like you get a paper cut on your arm and it hurts. It's really kind of annoying, but it's not like, you can get through the day with it. But and that paper cut is akin to referring, just a very slight thing, like referring to black magic as bad magic, referring to the black sheep of the family. There are being blacklisted. There are so many terms in our society that we don't think about if we're white. And if you're black, you hear that stuff all the time. The real estate industry just in the last year stopped using master bedroom and master bathroom, and that's because those are microaggressions. And one is an annoyance, but if you get thousands of them, it's hard to go on. If they're everywhere all the time, and you can't expect, well, we do. We can expect society to change. It just doesn't change fast enough. What we can expect is that we're going to keep seeing it in our lifetime, and we have to figure out how we can be hurt less by that. And you can do some of that by who you surround yourself with. When I came out at 50 years old, telling people I was dating a man, I realized I was surrounded by people who shared my values, and no one had a negative reaction. Oddly, not even my family. My 70-year-old parents didn't have a negative reaction. They were both great, but everywhere outside my circle, I still felt it. And if you're a kid, you're 15, 16 years old, and you tell someone, and you're in a highly religious family, and your family says, no, you can't be. And your church says, if you are, you'll go, you can't continue to come here. You can lose your entire culture, your entire community. And we see that happen to kids. 40% of unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness are LGBTQ for that reason. And so that's why we have your given family and your found family, as we say in the LGBTQ culture. Because these are the people I chose. These are the people I want to surround myself with that don't make me feel like I'm less than everyone else. And when you're 14, 15 years old, you don't know how to do that. That's a lot harder than if you're middle-aged. I'm not sure how I started and where I ended up, but I just sort of my conversation there. I just kept talking till I was on another subject, I think. So.
Oh my gosh. Right. But good subjects. I mean, I think you were leaning into the, a really good tip about things that we can do, which is surrounding ourselves.
Yes.
With people who support us, who understand us, who get us, and not, yeah, in that found family or chosen family is a great example of that. I can't remember. I live in Texas now, and I have been doing letters to trans youth.
Oh, nice.
Because, I mean, I
It's
feel like just terror in my heart for what young people here must be going through. And I just love the programs that of actually helping to like connect people with those found families and like, grandparents and, I mean, it's a really cool thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And a straight therapist or a white therapist is not likely to move in that. A therapist in general is not likely to move in that direction, because when you show up and you're the client and they're the therapist, the issue isn't your environment. The issue is your psyche. So there's something wrong with you that we need to fix. If you just choose new friends, that's not going to fix anything, but it can. That's the dirty little secret that, and there are a lot of them in therapy. And, a coach who comes from your same community is likely to say, you have permission to get rid of the toxic people in your life that make you feel bad and to surround yourself with people who don't.
Love that. That is super, super powerful. Yeah, just that kind of wonderful, you're affirmatively choosing that. And I was just imagining, that counter to all the messages you hear elsewhere. In fact, I'm currently a good friend contact me yesterday, distraught because her 25-year relationship is suddenly in upheaval after learning of an affair. And, one of the things that she's actually a therapist. She asked me if I would send her love notes. Just like on it, right? So that's what I've been doing. I've just been sending her random text messages about how amazing she is. And because, the hit you take to like, you start the doubt you have in yourself and all, it just, oh yeah. So sending her love notes.
Nice.
So we have a few more things that we want to talk about. I think that's a great tip. I'm noticing like our time, I want to try to get that in. If there are other things, are there any other things just off the top of your head before we move on from this that you think that you would recommend in addition to surrounding yourself with good support systems?
I think, just the constant message that you are good enough. There's nothing wrong with you. There's something wrong with the world around you. And it's resulted in this, whether it was because of a single person who destroyed, your innocence as a kid, or whether it's constant messages. There's still, the message still needs to be there that this is not you.
Beautiful. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's good stuff. And the other thing,
I will tell you, the healing coach I used, her alter ego is, she's a sister of perpetual indulgence. I don't know if you've heard of them, but, and her name is Sister Glow Your Own Way. And her mission is to tell people they are loved. That's her sister mission. And so every single day on social media, she posts something about something affirming and then ends it with "you are loved." And it's just beautiful. And she has impacted so many people just from that message alone.
Awesome. If it's okay, I'd love to just link to her page.
Absolutely.
And share that. And that brings up, I think, a really important point is like, there might be people listening going, well, there aren't people around me. Like in Texas, I mean, they may well be very hard to find. I happen to have pride flags in my window to make sure that, you know, at least there's a known safe place in this area. But if you don't know, if you don't see that, you're not sure if they're, you know, how to reach out to those kinds of positive supports out there. Like I mentioned, there is an organization in that one example that, you know, helps you find some chosen supportive family. And I think, you know, those kinds of things exist in a bunch of different contexts, and just reaching out to, you know, doing some research, finding an organization that feels like they probably get you, that, you know, that they might be able to help with getting connected. And, you know, they may have programs, activities, things that you can get involved in that can help kind of create those circles for you. So I don't know about you, Noblelee, but I feel like had I had that, I would have been a lot, even just feeling sure, like I said, I had that nagging feeling like this isn't me, like there's nothing wrong with me, even though it seems like everything is telling me that, to have that assurance would have it would have changed things. I wouldn't have felt like I was alone and trying to lift the world so on my own. Anyway, how about you, Noblelee?
I just wanted to say another couple of things is like lead by example. You know, when you're out and about in the public, just love everybody. Like just love everybody. And then let other people see you loving everybody. And I always say this, if there was enough time in my day, I would be a volunteer hugger. And I would just like walk around the streets and I would hug anybody that would let me hug them. Because that is so important, to have a human touch. Like if you're houseless and you might not smell the best, or you might look, you know, a certain way, like just a human hug would like work wonders, and is really important in growth, is to just absolutely be treated like you are everything that you are, that a lot of people in society don't see. Like these beautiful people that are, you know, that are trans or queer or of color, and people are missing out on not knowing these beautiful people, and exactly what they have to offer is so much. And so like I call myself a hope dealer, because I'm out there slinging hope, you know, and I just love that. And absolutely, I don't feel my older brother was kidnapped and murdered when I was 3 years old, and my parents were unable to love me and give me that kind of nurturing type of love that I needed. And then because I wasn't allowed to say what was going on with me, then people thought that I was bad and something was wrong with me, so they didn't want to love on me. And so I, you know, would turn to an older boy that, you know, wanted to love on me in the wrong way for the wrong reasons. And it just led to this life that I believe I probably wouldn't have chose if I would have had the proper support. And this was a 2.5 decades worth of horrific trauma, substance abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault, the death of my only baby boy, you know. And so during each traumatic event that was, you know, added, that came upon, I still got no support. But then again, my brother died in 1976. My parents got no support. And so my parents were unable to give me any support because they themselves didn't get support. And then, you know, had my son made it, I might not have been able to give him support because I didn't get support. And then that becomes generational at that point. So it's key for us to break the cycle, and to get the support, the proper support, the coach, instead of the therapy, that the therapist that doesn't get you, that you have to spend half of your sessions trying to explain yourself, and what it's not, that's not helpful. And so
I want to comment on the intergenerational trauma, because a lot of people struggle to understand what that is and why it's a thing. Intergenerational trauma is real. You don't have to have your child could have led a life where they were impacted by the death of your brother, who they never knew and who died decades before they were born. And that is intergenerational trauma.
Yeah, for instance, my grandmother was a victim of the boarding schools. Native American. She was forced to cut her hair. She was beaten for speaking her native language. I felt that.
Yep.
3 generations down.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yep. Same with Black people and slavery. There are so many people who want to say, why are people upset about it today? It's over. That was a long time ago. No, that trauma lives on, and the disparities live on, and the attitudes toward populations live on, and it is real. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us a place too dark there.
No, that was so good and informative, Troy. And I think that people are not fully aware of that and what that means and what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. We might actually want to, spend a whole conversation talking about that at some point in time, to because it is something I think that is very much not widely or well understood. And I think that there's also a lot of big system issues. So I don't think we're going to be able to dig in too deep today. But there's a bunch of stuff standing in the way of making the changes that you're talking about, Troy. So when we're, and of course you did say, we're not saying, don't go to counseling. I mean, counseling is still can be very, very helpful, very beneficial. There's plenty. I've complained about some stuff that I've been through, but I've also had some real help. But there are some real changes that if they could be made, they could make a real difference. Noblelee and you and I could have had very different experiences in our adult lives and our youth as well, had we had proper care. And that's not just from mental health practitioners, that's in our broader support systems too, right? And like you mentioned, like your parents weren't equipped really, because they weren't getting the proper support. So these things kind of pile on top of each other. But then I'm thinking, great, I'm loving this idea of that, layering in the coach work, but the fact that there's such a financial barrier, and then you're talking, if there is this shift in mental health care away from this kind of biomedical diagnostic, then even if it's not a coach, my counselor, I can't get my insurance to cover my counseling sessions because they don't meet those criteria. So it seems like there's some like really big system issues that have to change, in addition to getting enough people in to actually provide that kind of support. And
I'll just say just a couple more words about insurance and diagnosis. The catch-all category that therapists use when there isn't a clear mental illness is they diagnose people with adjustment disorders. but that still suggests that the client is disordered. And an adjustment could be an adaptable, reasonable adjustment given the horrific circumstances. And so it's not an adjustment disorder. It might be, an adjusted mindset. It might be, there might be things that can be adjusted, but it's not, the person should not be seen as disordered. And even as I say all that, I want to also say that even if you do have a major mental illness, the way that people are seen in this country who are diagnosed with a mental illness has huge stigma associated with it. And so it may sound like I'm trying to distance people who are dealing with cultural and familial trauma as separate from people with a serious and persistent mental illness. I don't mean to suggest that means people with serious mental illness are bad or worse or any of those things. So, and I'm just aware that as I was speaking about it, it may come across that way. And so the diagnoses are helpful when it's, a psychotic disorder and you believe that the world is coming to an end and Jesus Christ has told you the only way to save the earth is to kill your child.
Right.
Right. Obviously we don't want that to happen.
Right.
And so, we do, having the right diagnosis to get the right medication to help that person recover their hopes and dreams is great. And I don't in any way mean to suggest that they're the real ill ones or anything like that.
I really appreciate that distinction, Troy, especially because I know a good friend of mine who we've had on as a guest has bipolar 1 disorder, was so glad when they finally had medication that would actually work and help her to live full life. I mean, she's been my friend since we were teenagers. And so I watched and was there for the first manic episode when she was about 30. And, this whole transformation, and watch systems completely fail her. The medication nightmare before it actually got better. None of that is her fault. None of that makes her bad. She's amazing. And thank goodness she's finally gotten good care so that she can also live that full life. Yeah. Okay. So I know that you had one other question for Troy, but I'm wondering if we can, maybe we can kind of touch on that quickly, Noblelee.
Yeah, the question we kind of did touch on it already, but what kind of changes, can we do as a society in the mental health systems to where, drugs aren't getting pushed on, or you're only being allowed 6 sessions, or insurance isn't covering, the counseling, or that it takes like 3 sessions to bond with somebody and then you only have 3 left, or if you don't bond with somebody, then you have to tell your story all over again. What can we do to get more counseling added, sessions added, or to help these issues?
Right.
As a whole.
Yeah. Right. So like those big things, do we need changes in the law? Do we need to, what is it that gets us from where we are now to this, in a dream world, maybe?
Yeah, that is a tough one. There are, and have been for decades, at least back to the late 80s, groups working on what's called mental health parity, which means that mental health care is covered at the same level as physical health care. And it's closer than it used to be, but it's still, when they say you have a certain number of sessions and that's it, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Because how is every disorder, if it is disorders, and for lack of a better word, how are they all treatable in the same number of a small handful of sessions, right? And people are still trained. I mean, they still learn Freud and Jung and Skinner and, you know, all of those old therapists, Carl Rogers and Maslow. And so they still get the same education with the same old history. None of those therapists or psychologists limited themselves to 6 sessions. Those, you know, there is a movement called brief therapy, where it is just a handful of sessions, and it usually works when you have very similar backgrounds, and it's just a behavior anomaly, and not at my core I feel like something is wrong, and I don't know whether I can go on. I mean, how do you do that in 6 sessions, even if it's a great therapy match, right? Impossible.
Totally impossible.
Yeah. So we would have to get mental health parity. And it's, like I said, it's closer than it used to be, but it's still a long ways away.
You know, another thing that popped into my head, I thought of Kwika when she was talking with us, Noblelee. Kwika is a director of a safe outdoor spaces for the Colorado Village Collaborative. She's incredible. And she came and shared her story with us. And what stuck out to me was she was talking about like learning about what was going on with her in really healing, and that she had she had started drinking again briefly, and just like, oh, okay, I know what's, there's something else going on here. I need more time to heal. But what stuck out to me was she was talking about how she was in a transitional housing program where she had time and space, that she didn't have to like deal with, a ton of, the work pressure and stuff, so that she could, barely make ends meet paying her rent and things like that, that it's like, how the heck are you supposed to deal with these big stuff that needs healing when you're barely scraping by and maybe teetering on the edge with your housing? And so to me, it seems like we also need like these bigger, like if we're talking about like really like life contextual stuff, we need more space and support for healing broadly as well.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Any final comments you want before we wrap up?
I'll just say thank you for having me. I'm so in love with the two of you right now. You both appear to have figured out your paths forward through a lot of barriers.
Yeah.
And it makes me happy. And as a therapist, knowing that it wasn't therapists that got you there, that makes me happy too.
I love it. Wow. Oh, thank you for that. And
I will never get another job in community mental health if this video is out there for people to see.
fair enough.
Unless they really want to make change and they're committed to it.
See, they should want to bring you and many people like you on board to really help people like Noblelee and me get to the places that we are. I am feeling pretty good.
I did want to show everyone my cat.
Oh, ooh, I love it. I
Part of
love
my
it.
Palm Springs collection.
Ooh, I love it. That's a sweet collection. So, okay, well then, let's go ahead and wrap up with I have a couple of announcements I'll share. And then of course we'd love to join us in our two medicines at the end. So, we have folks made some changes to this second half of our 2023 blog and conversation series, because we really realize that OnSurviving is really a growing body of learning from each other's stories, from professionals like Troy, who also bring their stories. And we want to be able to have this kind of building collection that people can access anytime, whether they want to dive into the full long conversation like this, or smaller highlights from the conversation, or even into the reading. So we offer these different ways of tapping in to the learning. So, and that will include now our paired articles once a month. We're going to take a topic a month. It will include the paired articles, a conversation like this. And then in the same month, clips from that conversation, where we're grabbing some like key messages, key highlights from that. And then I also added something new that we were always intending to do, but finally got around to doing it, is actually taking the themes and kind of key learning about what we can do for ourselves, those of us struggling with surviving. So things that we can do for ourselves that can be more helpful for ourselves, things that our personal support systems can do to support us better, as well as what public systems and public or other, professional systems can do. So that has started a little bit, and we'll keep adding to that from each conversation going forward now. So then, somewhere down the line, somebody wants to dip back into this, they can do that. So, so y'all know that that's where we're headed, and really just trying to make this a resource that's all about what works for folks going through it, and what doesn't work. And let's not do those things anymore. So we, as we asked for at the end of our last set of conversations, we do invite you to make any requests for topics for us to write about, as well as any suggestions for guests to bring on to share their stories, or to talk about from some sort of professional aspect. Please do contact us through Facebook or through the Community Wisdom website, if you have some interest or a suggestion for us. So that said, our next articles for our August conversation are already drafted. And they are focused on how we can care for our self-esteem when living with significant mental health challenges. So very excited to be joined in that conversation by Nakia Winfield, who is an anti-racism educator, facilitator, and leadership coach. So there we have a coach on with us, and oh my gosh, you are going to love her. So all around incredible human being. We'll get a date out for when that conversation will be. That is not set in stone yet. So stay tuned for that. So that is all the announcements that I have. Anything else, Noblelee? Did I miss anything?
No, that sounds really good for the announcements. I just want to say, Troy, you're just an amazing, amazing human being. And I just thank you for being on here, and I thank you for all the information and all the things that you are doing. It's been an honor and a pleasure to meet you and have you on here. So thank you for that.
You're very kind, and it's my pleasure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, then let's go ahead and close. Noblelee.
So the two best medicines are laughter and water. So we like to close with a joke. So the joke for this episode is, when does a regular joke become a dad joke?
I don't know.
When it's apparent.
Oh. On point.
Oh, okay. She knew the punchline, and she's still laughing hysterically.
It's my favorite part, Troy.
And water. Stay hydrated. Water is life.
It is. Cheers to you both and everybody out there. Thanks for being with us.
Yes.
Thank you.